All right, I want to wrap up with talking a little bit about the predictors of happiness. And the interesting thing which we mentioned is that there are some key indicators of happiness that are worth emphasizing. And then when I wrap this one up, we'll spend a little time talking about forgiveness, which is not in your book, but I think worth mentioning. Happy people share many similar characteristics, and the keys to keep in mind is, particularly in individualistic countries, one is high self-esteem, and this is not connected to earning potential, but particularly in individualistic countries, a high self-esteem is a key. Another one is optimism, how optimistic somebody is. That doesn't mean that they are unrealistic, but it does mean that they look on the positive side of things, looking for other things to rejoice in or be encouraged by. They're outgoing. They are often agreeable, easy to get along with. It isn't a put-on kind of aspect. Usually they have very close relationships when they have them. This doesn't mean many relationships, but close friendships, oftentimes a satisfying marriage. And I'll put marriage in here. If they're not married, it's the nature of their closeness and connectedness in their relationships itself. Work and leisure engage their skills, and so a lot of times, unfortunately, in some cases, their work and their leisure are combined, but it really does engage them, and they find fulfillment in both. When we're talking about the level of happiness, and then a religious faith of some sort is also a measure or a predictor of happiness as well. And then finally, the sleeping and exercise are also part of the backdrop of what usually refers to as that we refer to as happiness. One of the things to connect with this is the exercise in particular is the endorphins that oftentimes that are released during this are also connected to the higher level of dopamine that people often experience, or I should say serotonin. And serotonin is directly related to positive mood and mood regulation, which are all key points to keep in mind here. So these are a few characteristics. I think if you were to summarize a good bit of these, one of the interesting things that I would make a highlight of is the aspect which we talk a lot around CCU is the whole idea of community. And when you look at it, we gain a number of different things in developing a good community, and that is connectedness, which goes to not only spiritually, but emotionally as well, that we gain as a result of our faith. And connectedness is also a quality, if you will, of the Trinity. The Trinity itself provides us with the ground of understanding in terms of community. So each one of these things, our identity, instead of something as shallow as self-esteem, we can actually talk about identity. Who we are in Christ defines us, and defines us as worthwhile, even if we don't behave the way we should. It gives us an optimistic point of view as well. It may not be optimism for the world around us and where history is taking us, but it does have an optimism in what God can do in people's lives. The level of connectedness we can experience, ideally in the church, we should be able to display a level of connectedness that few other people can find. and finding meaning and purpose out of the things that we actually do are also quite important. So what you can find, and it's contained in this simple statement of religious faith, but we find meaning and purpose in a lot of things that happen to us, not only positive but also negative, and contribute to our level of happiness. The other thing I'd just put into perspective for you is that happiness is really rooted in the same word as happenings. That preface here, HAPP, and so by its very nature, it is temporary. It is not lasting, just like anger oftentimes isn't lasting. Happenings, happenstance, happiness is very situational by its nature. The question is what can we develop within our lives that isn't as situational, and that's where the aspect of joy comes in. This is not a situational or circumstantial characteristic, but a trait-like characteristic that we can cultivate inside of us that we can experience in ways that is not rooted in the circumstances of our life.